Hi, welcome to the Week 1 NFL Fan Duel video. My name is Kaz Kalita, and I'll be walking you through all of my favorite FanDuel plays each and every week throughout the 2018 season. Before we dive into my favorite Week 1 plays, let's go ahead and talk about my background a little bit. I've been playing DFS for the last 5 years and have had modest success each and every year. Each of the last 4 years, I've written articles for various websites such as fantasypros.com, draftstars.net, and goingfor2.com. Each of the last 3 years, I've had a weekly guest segment on ESPN Waco, Texas, KRZI, talking about weekly DFS picks. So now that you've heard about my background, let's go ahead and dive into my favorite Week 1 plays on FanDuel. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of my favorite plays for Week 1. If you're not familiar with FanDuel's layout, this is what the interface looks like on desktop. Um, so your lineup consists of a quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, which is a new position this year. In the past, they've had a kicker there, which I'm very thankful for them to getting rid of that. It's just such a headache trying to determine which kicker is going to do well each week. There's just such high variance in kickers, so I'm glad that it switched that to a flex, which could be a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end, and then also a defense here. Scoring is pretty straightforward. It's just like your typical season-long league. You get 1 point for every 25 passing yards, 1 point for every 10 rushing or receiving yards. 6 points for 4 points for passing touchdowns, and then 6 points for rushing or receiving touchdowns, and then it's a half-point PPR format. So let's go ahead and start with quarterback here. At the top this week, salary wise, we have Tom Brady, $8,600. While you can never go wrong with Tom Brady, he's one of the greatest of all time. I'm going to slide down to Drew Brees here this week, and he's going to be my favorite quarterback. Whenever Drew Brees is playing at home, it's just such an advantage for him, and we want to target him when he's playing at the Superdome. He's played exactly 125 games on the road and 125 games at home. And in that span, he's thrown 66 more touchdowns at home than he has on the road. The Buccaneers are not that great on defense. They're about middle of the pack against the pass, so we shouldn't fear them by any means at all. And currently, this game has the second highest projected game total in Vegas. The Superdome in itself is it's kind of like the Coors Field of but for football. On that turf surface, teams just fly, and it's usually a shootout each and every week inside that stadium. And right now, the Saints actually come in as the highest projected team total on the week with 29.5. So we definitely want to target them somewhere in our lineups this week, and I think Drew Brees is a good start there. If you don't want to use Drew Brees, you can slide down. I think Andrew Luck in his first game back in a while is in a good spot against Cincy. They're nothing special on defense. Andrew Luck is priced down at $7,300, even though he's healthy and he has a talent to be a top five quarterback for the whole season. So I think that this is a good spot for him if you want to use him there instead of Drew Brees. Another guy I like in the mid range is Kirk Cousins at $7,600 at home against San Francisco. San Francisco was really bad against the pass last year. In fact, I think they ranked second to last against the opposing quarterbacks throughout the 2017 season. And Cousins coming to a new team, he has great weapons and a good offensive line. So I think he's in a good spot for his debut in purple there. If we slide down to the value range here, I don't recommend using anybody down here for like 50-50 contests or head-to-heads, which I refer to as cash games. For cash games, in those instances, you want to be a little bit more conservative. You want to go with the safer plays, since 50% of the pool doubles up their money. It's a better play just to be a little bit safer, not to get too cute in those type of contests. Now, if you're playing in tournaments where only you're going up against 10,000 people and only 20% people cash, and really only like the top 2 to 3% of people really make good cash on that, then you want to try and differentiate your lineups a little bit. Try to think about who's going to be popular and try to avoid them. Because if they don't hit and your player does hit at that position, then you're at such a huge advantage. And one guy I like for tournaments this week, I think he might slide under the radar a little bit, is Ryan Tannehill of the Dolphins. He set out all of last season with an injury, but prior to being out, he threw for over 4,000 yards. He's working with Adam Gase again this year, who's a great offensive-minded coach. And I think people just forget that he threw for over 4,000 yards, so he can definitely fly under the radar here against Tennessee, who's not a great defense either. Those are really the only few quarterbacks I'm really targeting this week. So let's slide over to running back here. So the first thing we want to look at here, Le'Veon Bell, he's got this little note here. If you haven't heard yet, he has not reported to the team camp yet. He's holding out for a new contract. So he's unlikely to suit up for week one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go slide down to, or type in James Conner. You can go down and slide down. But at $5,000, he is a must play lock. You have to put him in your lineup at $5,000. He's going to be the starting running back for Pittsburgh this week. He might lose a few pass downs or passing downs to another running back on the roster, but for the most part, he is going to be the early down back this week against Cleveland. And it's not every day that or every week you can get a starting running back for only $5,000. So we definitely want to take advantage of his price, his mispricing this week. So put him in there. Another spot here, Kamara's in a good spot. Like I mentioned, the Saints are good at home. Mark Ingram's suspended for the first few games, so it's going to be all Kamara and everything he can handle. He's not a bad play if you want to play him. David Johnson's okay too, but the guy I'm really targeting as my higher priced running back is Melvin Gordon. Gordon last year averaged nearly 18 carries per game. He saw an uptick in receptions out of the backfield, and over each of the last 2 years actually. So I think he continues to get even more involved in the passing game. And also, they're playing against the Chiefs, who are not that great against opposing running backs. They're only middle of the pack. So I like sliding down there because if you take the $600 discount from Kamara and $500 from Johnson and $200 from Zeke, you can really open the door to some other players at wide receiver, which we're going to see here in a minute. If outside of that, McCaffrey's not a good or not a bad play here at $7,500. By all indications, he's going to be the bell cow back in Carolina. They did sign C.J. Anderson, but it doesn't sound like he's going to have a huge role. And McCaffrey's really active in the passing game, so for point 0.5 PPR, that's a big thing. I think Cook at $7,300 is very good. That's pretty cheap for the amount of workload that he's going to see. And Alex Collins at $600 or $700. That's probably my top, outside of Connor. That's probably my top value play at running back this week. He might lose some pass downs to Javarius Allen and Kenneth Dixon, but for the most part, he is the guy on early downs. So at $6,700, he's in a good spot against Buffalo, who really struggled against the run last year. Another one, Lamar Miller too, with Donta Freeman out for 6 weeks on the PUP list. He's going to get all he can handle, so he's another value guy too if you want to go to that route as well. I do recommend going one high price running back though, especially in your cash games. They are the safest plays at running back. Those high priced guys. In fact, like a couple years ago, almost every single week, I either rostered Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson. Their prices got up pretty high, but they were so consistent, scoring 20, 25 points each and every week. It was just a lock almost to lock one of those two guys in. So that's definitely the approach to go, in my opinion. If we slide over wide receiver, since we are going cheap with his teammate James Conner, Antonio Brown is definitely in play, even though he's the top priced wide receiver. With Le'Veon Bell out, they're probably going to lean even more on Brown. So with him being already the best wide receiver in the league, and with Le'Veon Bell out, I think he's in a really good spot against Cleveland. And I highly recommend putting him in your cash games for sure. Another guy we can go with too that is high priced is DeAndre Hopkins at $800. This is another really high scoring game in New England between the Patriots and the Texans. In fact, they have a higher projected game total than that Saints Buccaneers game. So we definitely want to target at least one or two players, probably from one of the or each side of that game. Hopkins is another elite wide receiver. New England really doesn't have an answer for him in the secondary. They really struggled against opposing wide receivers last year, and they didn't really get any help this year as well. So he's a good play there. For the third guy, I'm probably gonna go down to on the opposite side of that game, Chris Hogan at 66 or $6,700. Um, he's been Brady's favorite target so far in the preseason and throughout camp with Edelman suspended and Brandon Cooks going or being shipped out to LA. Hogan's been the guy. It's pretty much going to be him and Gronk in the passing game early on until Edelman comes back. And Houston was another team that struggled against in the secondary last year. I believe they ranked actually last against opposing wide receivers, so he's definitely a good option here in this high scoring game. So since we went kind of high priced at wide receiver, we probably want to go a little bit cheaper at tight end here. I mean, Gronk at the top. I'm not really a fan of paying up for Gronk each and every week. Some guys like it, but I'm not really a fan of it because by paying that much for him, you really kind of hurt yourself in other areas. So I like to pay down a little bit more at tight end. Kelsey's not a bad option. Walker's always safe. Miami's pretty bad against opposing tight ends. $6,100. He's a pretty good play. Um, who else here? Charles Clay is pretty much Buffalo's only passing option. I wouldn't probably play him in this lineup because, as you'll see in a minute, I'm really going to target the Baltimore defense against the Bills this week. But if for some reason you don't use Baltimore defense, Charles Clay at $5,200 is not a terrible option. If we slide down even further, though, the guy I really want to target, but we do have to keep an eye on his injury status, is Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He had an abdomen injury pop up on Wednesday, so we got to keep an eye there. But if he does in fact suit up, um, we probably want to target him against the Giants. The Giants were probably the team to target with tight ends last year. They ranked dead last against opposing tight ends, and you could almost bank on opposing teams getting one touchdown from the tight end position against them. They're just terrible across the middle of the field, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins is a big body guy, and really no, there's no other big body guy that the Jaguars have on offense. So anytime in the red zone, he's going to be a threat for them this weekend. So that leaves one position for our flex here. Um, so we're probably going to go pretty cheap here. We only have an average of $4,700 left, and there's another guy. Is actually Austin Seferian-Jenkins' teammate that I really like is Keelan Cole. So we're going to slide him in there with Marquise Lee being out for the rest of the season with an ACL injury. Um, Keelan Cole is probably he has a good chance to be the guy in Jacksonville in terms of wide receivers. These salaries came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, well before the Lee injury was known. So we really get a nice little break here at that price with him being the primary receiver there in Jacksonville. Let's see here. If we go over to defense, I have two kind of minds of thinking of defense. I usually either pay up for the best option or I try to go really cheap and see if I can find one at the bottom of the barrel that'll do pretty well. This week, I really highly recommend using the Ravens, though, against the Bills. Peterman was named the quarterback for the Bills, the starting quarterback. And if you recall, last year he had a game against San Diego where he threw 5 interceptions in one half. This guy is just not very good. Their offense isn't really good. I know they still have Shady McCoy, but he's getting up there in age, and he really struggled inside the red zone. So I really like the Ravens, they're a really strong defensive unit, and they have a really great matchup against Buffalo there. If you don't use the Ravens, I mean, there's some other teams you can definitely slide down and use. I like the Saints defense at home. They were actually very, very good defense last year. Years prior to that, they were a defense we targeted, but last year they really went out and made some really good moves and signed or drafted some really good defensive players. So they're a solid defense this week. Um, who else? There's really not any cheap defense I like this week. They're all pretty priced pretty accordingly, in my opinion. If you really want to go bargain bin, and I don't recommend this for cash games, maybe for a tournament, if you really want to get some more high price studs in there, you can try Miami at home against Tennessee. I usually like trying to target defenses at home. Usually they do better at home than they do on the road. So that could be an option only for tournaments though. Don't do this for cash games. Don't do it for 50-50s. If you're doing 50-50s, I'd highly recommend paying up for the Ravens and going that route. Um, but that's pretty much what my cash game is going to look like at the moment here. For tournaments, I like stacking a lot, and so stacking, same players from same teams, and bringing it back with another player on the other team. So some good stacks this week. You can stack New England, Brady with Hogan, and then bring it back with Hopkins on the other side. Same with that New Orleans game with Breeze and Michael Thomas, and then bring it back with maybe Michael Evans or maybe someone a little bit more under, or maybe actually tight end probably there with either Howard or Brait, because the Saints have a really good cornerback in Marcus Lattimore, in my opinion. Or in all likelihood, he's probably going to be covering Mike Evans quite a bit in that game. So I think a sneakier play for tournaments could be going the tight end route there for that stack. But that's pretty much what everything looks like for week one. So if you have any questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter. My username on Twitter is Kaz KAZ underscore Kalita KALITA. Feel free to hit me up whether the question is about DFS, your FanDuel lineups, or even your weekly or your season long lineups, sit start questions. I'm always on there, so you can feel free to hit me up and ask me any question you like. Good luck in week one, everyone. Thank you.